that we have been hosting over the last few weeks. My name is Vamara Nextdoor. I am CARICOM Technical Focal Point for the Food and Agriculture Organization. I will be a moderator for today's session, and I will take us through our final session in support of preparing our disaster response and recovery webinar series in preparation for the 2025 hurricane season. So just a quick welcome to everyone on the call, colleagues from the CARICOM Secretariat, representatives from SEDIMA, representatives from AICA, representatives from the FAO, representatives from CARDI, representatives from ACARI, and other member states, Ministries of Agriculture, technical officers, extension officers, farmers, fisher folk, other fishers, other stakeholders within the agricultural sector. We really welcome your presence today at our session. So just quickly recapping, over the last 5 weeks, we have been talking about how do we prepare and providing practical guidelines to help you for the 2025 hurricane season. We began our series talking about assets, on-farm and on-sea assets. How do we protect these assets and our livelihoods in preparation for the hurricane season? Week 2, we dived deeper into what do we do for crops and our protection of our crops on farms. Then we went into a series session on week 3 on livestock, looking at animals, protecting them, their houses, what we need to have in place. Then we went into a session on fisheries. What do we do with our fish? And we heard a lot from the CRFM and the work that is going on to promote preparedness, especially in the times of disasters. This week, we bring it all together by teaming up to talk about recovery and response and what does that really mean. And we will feature today presentations from SEDIMA, AICA, FAO, CARDI, ACARI on this topic. With that, I want to take us quickly and straight over to our panelists. And before we get off, I want to invite Ms. Denise Murillo from the CARICOM Secretariat to bring some remarks. Denise, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you so much, Ramaran. So we welcome you to as Ramaran has said, this is the final webinar for the series, and we have gone over many important areas for farmers and fisher folks, livelihood, ensuring that they're prepared for the disaster season. And as such, the CARICOM as a region, we have also provided some level of response and recovery plan. So the emergency response strategy and action plan for the agriculture sector in the Caribbean provides such coverage. And it includes not just only, let me just share my presentation, just 1 second. So the emergency response strategy and action plan that was developed back in 2021 for the agriculture sector in the Caribbean, its purpose is to focus for an immediate and coordinated response, right? Through emergency agriculture assistance in any affected CARICOM member state or associate member state. There is a procedure in that plan, there's a sequence of procedures in the event of disasters. And it also provides guidelines for coordinating regional and international agriculture assistance in supporting these responses at the national level to ensure that or the impact to allow for adequate response on the impact of a natural disaster or hazard. It provides tools for the assessment of damage and loss caused to the agriculture sector. That would be crops, livestock, fishery, forestry, in any of the member state, CARICOM member state, or the associate member state. And in it, an identification of recovery and rehabilitation needs. And in this plan, there are several stakeholders and beneficiaries. It includes ministries of agriculture within the national territories, environment and fishery ministries, including forestry divisions. It includes the CARICOM Secretariat, the disaster risk management agencies, the National Disaster Offices and CDEMA, the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, CRFM, the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, international agriculture agencies operating in the region, in the Caribbean, NGOs, agriculture-based NGOs, and community-based organizations. It also includes farmers and farming households. They're the ones who are being impacted, right? So they're key stakeholders in this plan. Fisher folk, including aquaculturists as well, agricultural associations, cooperatives, and farmers, fisher groups, consumer and marketing distribution organizations, agriculture-linked industries such as food processing and tourism. As we know that it's cross-cutting, it cuts across, and it's important for the tourism sector in providing food. Agriculture, education institution, colleges, universities, and other tertiary institutions, and even the media. They're all stakeholders and beneficiaries of the plan. So the total number of member states or coverage of the plan is for 20 CARICOM member states and associate member states. They include Anguilla, Antigua and Barbuda, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, and Turks and Caicos Islands. So in this line of webinars we've had several key takeaways, and one of them is in preparing for an emergency disaster plan for your farm and assets in advance of hurricane season. So we have a regional plan, we have supporting agencies, we have key agencies leading out in particular elements of the plan. We also have now at the farm level the need for a plan. So in the webinars, we've been looking at those type of elements to include in your disaster plan, including designing your farm in the first instance to account for any risk of any possible natural disaster, including, proper drainage systems, checking dams, breakwinds, etc. Also use disaster-proven material for construction. So even in your construction, there must be that element. Proper storage for fertilizers, insecticides, and even if there are medicines and different other important resources you need to store, and ensure that they're stored properly. Establish communication network within your community, ensuring that you have a line of communication with those around you, with those of the authorities within your community. How do you reach out to them? How they reach out to you? Be aware, be alert of different notices, bulletins regarding the disaster. Another important takeaway was keep an inventory, record of your farm, your equipment, your assets. Even ensure that you have records of production, and you also have a record of your animal health and those type of records, and ensure that there's someone who will be responsible for those keeping to ensure it's safe right? And where possible, purchase the necessary insurance. Always be alert. From a regional standpoint as well, I just would like to point out here too that there is currently a World Food Program Security and Livelihood Survey, which seeks to try to capture some of the data on household vulnerabilities, which would also include the farmers and fisher folks household, and and looking at providing evidence that would directly inform disaster risk reduction strategies by identifying at-risk populations, guiding targeted preparedness efforts, and supporting early warning systems. As such, the insights from the survey are highly relevant, and we would encourage those who have tuned in we'll put in the link for that survey and encourage you to be a part of it so that we are able to gather the relevant information that it would inform future development or for preparation from a regional level to support the region. So please be a part of that survey. We will have that in the link shortly so that you can also participate in that. Overall, just be alert and be aware of what is happening around you and be prepared. So for that, I'd like to end and hand it over to Ramaran, just in a nutshell, indicating that we collaborate. The collaboration is important with stakeholders, and the impact is important as well. So let us keep the communication among ourselves, especially as we prepare for the hurricane season and for any other natural disasters that we may foresee. So thank you very much. I turn it back over to Ramaran.
All right, thank you, Denise. Yes, and really important to know that we have a
I'm
framework.
not sure what happened. I couldn't see
Really
anything
have a-
on my end. Only saw one.
Oh, hi, Denise, you're still on. Just glad to know that we do have a regional framework and a framework that has been developed with the collaboration of the partners by the Secretariat to sort of inform member states on having an emergency response plan and having it broken down to what we can really do practically on the ground. It's really a welcome approach to start the discussion today. So I want to take our turn now to begin. What does recovery mean? While we do have a response plan, how do we bring this into action on the ground? So this afternoon, I want to invite Mrs. Humira Gulstan, the Hazard Mitigation Specialist from the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, Trinidad and Tobago, who's representing SEDEMA, our Caribbean Disaster Emergency Agency, to share with us on the practical approaches and the work in response that is undertaken, in response to disaster. Mrs. Gulstan, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to respond to the question. As mentioned, my name is Camille Golston. Today I'm representing the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is a regional intergovernmental agency for disaster management in CARICOM. So just as a background, the Caribbean faces increased exposure to more intense and frequent tropical cyclones, which is further exacerbated by climate change. For some countries, damage and loss has exceeded 200% of national GDP, exposing serious gaps in response coordination and recovery financing. In 2010, St. Vincent and the Grenadines experienced significant damage with the passage of Hurricane Thomas. Losses attributed to the agricultural sector were estimated at $26 million US, whereas Hurricane Maria impacted Dominica in 2017, with damage to the agricultural sector estimated at approximately $55 million US. Events like Hurricanes Thomas and Maria have shown that the agricultural sector can sustain millions in damages, and this underscores the need for detailed economic analysis. Without a clear picture of what was lost, it becomes nearly impossible to plan an effective response and guide recovery efforts. But there's a silver lining. To support countries with this necessary analysis, SEDIMA has established mechanisms to assess damage and loss and recommend what is necessary to build back better and reduce future risk. This is primarily achieved through detailed damage sector assessment and the post-disaster needs assessment under the damage assessment and needs analysis continuum, as you see in the figure on the right. And this is implemented through SEDIMA's regional response mechanism. The regional response mechanism acts as a vehicle to deliver timely and coordinated response to affected participating states leveraging the collective capacity of the region. So we see where engineers from Trinidad and Tobago, utility technicians from Bahamas, professors from Jamaica, all come together to support the assessment at no cost to the country. And this is established through different teams. So SEDIMA, in collaboration with partners, developed a regional recovery planning framework to standardize how participating states plan for, coordinate, and finance recovery. This comes in the form of building national recovery capacities before disasters, so focusing more on preparedness, bridging the void between response and early recovery, enabling fast-track recovery in the aftermath of disasters, but also building resilience by ensuring disaster risk-informed recovery efforts and investment. We also include the integration of vulnerability data to ensure that we have longer-term resilience planning. At the national level, Trinidad and Tobago has taken concrete steps to embed recovery coordination into its emergency response structure. And this ensures quicker transition from relief to rehabilitation, and SEDIMA supports this process. So in terms of training, we would have conducted training with key sectors in post-disaster needs assessment and recovery planning coordination, and this would have included the agricultural sector. Trinidad and Tobago also initiated the collection of damage and loss data at the household level onto a digital platform, and we also include this information from farmers who live in communities. We also provide recommendations for risk-informed planning and integrate these recommendations into our drafted National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Governance Framework, and we have established mechanisms to strengthen early warning messages. So on the right of the screen, you would see one of the bulletins that would have been shared from the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, providing tips to livestock farmers, which included tagging animals, keeping drains clear, moving animals to higher ground, and securing them. But in terms of practical steps that farmers could take to rapidly recover and rebuild after hurricanes, it is important to systematically list damage and loss in terms of crops, livestock, farm equipment, boats in the case of fishers, storage buildings, irrigation and drainage systems, and access roads. So as Ms. Marola was mentioned in the previous presentation, take pictures, make proper records before and after, estimate how much you would have earned if there was no hurricane, and write it down. In terms of submission, submit this information through official channels. Recording what is lost is the first step in terms of getting support, and this information is also important to be captured into the post-disaster needs assessment. Secondly, apply for financial relief to be able to access recovery tools. Leverage the financial instruments to stabilize your operations. Register for seed input packages, fertilizer distributions, or direct subsidies. Submit claims for your crop and livestock insurance early with the complete documentation, and engage with your Agricultural Development Bank or other accredited institutions for concessional credit to replace inputs, restart production, or rehabilitate infrastructure. Once you provide these validated damage and loss estimates and recovery plans, this will strengthen your loan or grant application. In terms of the third step or third recommendation, we would like to propose that persons rehabilitate strategically to avoid future loss. Identify specific vulnerabilities that would have led or contributed to observed impacts. So poor drainage, low-lying land, wind exposure. Integrate these protective measures and corrective measures into your rehabilitation plan by elevating nurseries or storage units, introducing slope stabilization or mulching in erosion-prone areas, rebuild with reinforced designs or better drainage, clear drains, and blocked water paths to prevent more flooding during the next rainfall event. Start with protecting your animals and seedfish. These measures reduce long-term risks and it also has the potential for you to qualify for potential support under public recovery programs or donor-funded reconstruction efforts. The fourth point is not to give up hope. Restart production with a focus on short maturity crops. Prioritize crops that provide rapid returns to restore food security and income. These focus on crops that could typically reach harvest within 30 to 90 days and require minimal capital, and crops that will help you buffer long-term income gaps based on your previous crop loss. Finally, participate in the capacity building initiatives to strengthen your resilience. Engaging in these training opportunities will help you build upon your information or knowledge regarding disaster and climate resilience. And these may include climate smart agriculture, slope management, water harvesting, livelihood diversification. Give yourself a chance to enhance your capacity to cope with future events, but to also improve your access to technical support, finance, and institutional partnerships. So looking ahead, recovery must not be reactive. It must be preemptive, finance, and risk informed. CDMA will continue to support its participating states through technical tools, capacity building, and policy alignment to strengthen recovery across the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gulston, and really welcome the practical approaches through the network and the training that has been received in the process to strengthen the members of the agricultural sector and the 5 key guideline points that we take away from your presentation, which we have the opportunity to discuss later on. Next, I want to welcome Dr. Mahendranath Singh, Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, to bring from the perspectives of the FAO, the approaches for disaster risk management and support that are provided that enhance coordination from the organization. Dr. Singh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Just allow me to share my screen. A pleasant good day to everyone tuned in. My contribution today is based on the role of FAO in recovery and response activities. Just to give a quick outline of the presentation, I'll touch on recovery and response at the global level, look briefly at the regional response mechanism, and then zero into the activities that FAO is involved in the region. So at the global level, FAO activities as it relates to disaster recovery and response are carried out within the context of the Global Humanitarian Coordination Architecture, and they have several mechanisms through which this is done, one of which is the interagency interagency standing committee, and FAO's emergency protocol aligns with this system, which governs the global humanitarian coordination. Another area is the global clusters, for which FAO co-leads the food security cluster with the World Food Programme, and this is basically coordinating food security responses both at the global and the regional and country level. So a typical disaster response flow involves, at the onset, a situation analysis is done, where the priority responses are identified. Next, it goes into an initial planning phase. Here, data from the initial rapid responses are analyzed and a report prepared, and an appeal goes out for the resources that will be required to address response activities. The next step is to carry out detailed needs assessment, and here the exact resources and the capacities that are required are identified, and mobilization begin. And then we go into the implementation phase where the emergency response is executed. And throughout this phase, there's continuous monitoring of the activity, monitoring and evaluation, and towards the end, there's a peer review evaluation process. So at the regional level, as the presenters before me state, that there is a regional response mechanism in place led by CDEMA, and FAO fits into this by providing support for the initial situation assessment and also the post-disaster needs assessment. Also, as Denise would have mentioned, there's the emergency response strategy and action plan, which basically provides guidance on all the modalities for coordination and collaboration in the event of a disaster. So we move now to the role of FAO in response and recovery. And by nature, FAO is a developmental agency, and its emergency activities reflect this focus. In the case of a disaster, once the request for support is received, FAO tries to work with the governments to assist and coordinate the agricultural relief and rehabilitation program with both national and external partners. And this role can be classified in 3 areas: the emergency response phase, supporting long-term delivery, and building resilience. And emergency response is basically trying to provide immediate assistance to the affected population. As mentioned before, we participate in the rapid needs assessment. And this is an important step because it allows us to collect the data on what is needed to guide the recovery and response measure. Another area is on the emergency response is FAO can also assist in mobilizing resources, probably through emergency projects, so that we can provide support to the farmers or the fishers that would need help getting back into production, whether it's distribution of inputs and so on. Moving to the supporting long-term recovery aspect, and here we operate in the context of building back better. And here we seek to support the government in developing the long-term recovery plan, whether this is technical support for strategies, developmental projects, and also strengthening capacities, be it at the national level, at institution, community-based, etc. And the last aspect is building resilience to future disaster. And here the aim is to provide or strengthen the ability of persons, communities, countries, so that they can withstand and recover from future shocks without suffering long-term setbacks. Some activities that we engage in under this area is promoting climate-smart practices, disaster risk management measures to enhance resilience to future shock, which includes promoting early warning system, developing anticipatory action protocols, and much of what we've been listening to for the past few weeks would fall into these categories. What are the things you would do to prepare and anticipate the shocks or the effects of a disaster so that the impact can be mitigated? Also supporting emergency preparedness and response, using remote sensing and geospatial tools to monitor risk, and I'll go into this a bit more, and also promoting risk-informed value chains. So with respect to using remote sensing and geospatial tools, this is an area that we've been working with in recent years, and we've worked with the governments, the ministries to establish drone and GIS team in several countries as shown here. And what this does is it gives the government and the Ministry of Agriculture an additional tool when it comes to disaster risk management, because it allows them to conduct rapid damage assessment And also equally important, before the disaster, is conducting mapping activities so that they can collect baseline data. Because baseline data is important when we go to do damage and loss assessment. We need to know what was there before and how it is damaged and how it was impacted. And we work with these teams to provide continuous capacity building so that they can develop assessment protocols and improve their capacity to do GIS analysis. And this is an example of what we're talking about, where this was prepared by the Dominica Drone and GIS team, where they use farm level data, geospatial data, and export judgment. And I highlight farm level data and export judgment there to note that geospatial data alone is not enough. You still need to have that data prior at the farm level and the experience of the people on the ground. We cannot discount that. So when we combine all of this, we're able to put together a protocol to quickly analyze and assess impacts. And this map shows the vulnerability to flooding. What they were able to do is based on previous experience, identify areas that are expected to be flooded once the relevant conditions persist. And then they planned the type of flights that would allow them to quickly gather the data on what the impact of the floods are. You see there we have 360 flights, transit flights, grid flight. So it's not only about mapping the entire area, because in a disaster situation, you might not have the time or the weather conditions may not permit complete mapping. But using the combination of farm level data and export judgment, you can sample and provide relevant and up-to-date accurate data to guide recovery and response activities. Here also is another example from Dominica, which shows the vulnerability for landslide and also the rapid assessment protocol. In St. Vincent, a similar exercise was done by both their drone and GIS team, and this shows the vulnerable areas to hurricane and the flight protocols they will activate once such a disaster impact them. Similarly for floods and drought. In this slide, we're showing how new technology can be used to assist in disaster response and recovery activities. All of us know Beryl was one of the last major disaster to hit us. And in this slide, we show in the bottom left is a satellite image from Union Island. And the other image is a satellite image of Union Island after the disaster. What we were able to do here is to task a satellite to capture data over this area for this specific period. And you know that for Grenada, no satellite tasking acquisition attempt was successful over the 2-week period, because even though these tools are available, there's still some limitations. This may be to poor weather condition, cold cover, or whatever. But these are just some of the tools that we have that can aid better response and recovery measures. And also, while we have this, it's also important to correlate it to the ground truth data as seen here. Then also we've been working with countries on anticipatory action protocol. Basically, what this does is allows us to map or outline your crop calendar, highlight what hazards may affect this crop and when, and also identify what are the triggers you need to look for and what actions should be taken, which basically, if we look back at the previous week's webinars, are a lot of anticipatory actions were identified. So this gives us the structure in which window, which actions should be taken. It's how and when and what. So my last slide is, I'll end with this, and it's basically saying preparedness leads to better response. The more we prepare, the better we're able to mitigate and faster we're able to recover. Thank you very much, and I hand you back now to Barbara.
I thank you, Dr. Singh. Very well received. And I think we welcome to see growth and use of technology and the application in the countries, really to help not just mapping, but really informing on our response and the impact. Pleased to see the collaboration between the technology and ground truthing and the farmers on the ground. I'm really happy to see that it grows in the number of teams that exist in the ground. So, and I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions during our open floor discussion time on it. So thank you very much for that. All right, next up on our agenda today, we are going to welcome to our floors to Mr. Kent Popel, representative from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture for the Jamaica office. Mr. Popel is going to share with us ICA's approach and responses to support disaster response and recovery that they provide to member states, to their farmers and fishers. Mr. Popel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you speak again? You're breaking up slightly.
Yeah, the signal is not the best, so I'm hoping that you can hear.
Okay, for now we can, so you can proceed.
All right, so I'll proceed. All right, thank you again for having us to be part of this panel, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible to avoid any disruption in the presentation if the signal drops. Just to start, I think it's important that we recognize that whether in terms of preparation before, after, during, we recognize that we need to include disaster in our preparation in our agribusiness development plan. We can't ignore disasters anymore, and we need to factor it in any planning that we have as it relates to agribusiness development. From a ICA perspective, what we do is to promote resilient practices and approaches to really reduce vulnerabilities to the recurrence of disasters that we are faced with, and we have seen quite a few in terms of hurricane, intense rain, and drought. Our disaster response and recovery in the agricultural sector focuses on efforts and programs to reduce or mitigate the effect of disasters on crops, livestock, and rural communities, taking a collective or holistic approach. Just to probably give an indication as to some of the things that we are doing to support the response and recovery. As I indicated earlier, that what we do is really to promote climate smart and sustainable practices throughout our ongoing technical cooperation program. And while we may do this, we actually work very closely with some key partners, first and foremost working through the governments, as well as partners like the FAO, CARDI, UNDP, and recently PISLM and CBF. Some of the interventions and support that we provide and we continue to provide is support towards agricultural policy development, and to include as part of that the building of resilience in the designing of the policies, programs, and strategies. Some of our technical program place a lot of emphasis on the issue of soil health, the introduction of green engineering, and we have really, that is something that we have been pushing in terms of land stabilization and protecting some of our slopes, as well as promoting opportunities for green business while we use those low-cost technologies. We recently have been introducing the use of precision agricultural tools, use of drones and drone technologies to monitor erosion and to help farmers to be more informed as to what's going on. And in Dominica in particular, we have done quite a bit in terms of soil stabilization, looking at the issue of contour drains, step drains, clearing some of the waterways, integrating the whole agroforestry and companion planting, reestablishing some of the issue of windbreaks, as well as cover crops to protect against drought. What we tend to promote very much in support of not just recovery, but in terms of preparation, is the issue of assessing vulnerabilities, promoting some of the adaptive technologies to reduce vulnerabilities, looking at various systems, whether rainwater harvesting, greenhouse technologies that is appropriate to certain areas. And in terms of our response after a storm, we actually participate in the damage assessment, supporting the farmers to reestablish their production base, also providing, in some cases, emergency supplies to support them right after a storm. We work very closely with the ministry in terms of restoration and rehabilitation. Quite of what we do is along the lines of capacity building. We actually work with farmers in terms of, as we say, build back better, but to build resilience in their systems. And ICA now is now reflecting on exploring more long-term strategies. And one of the strategies to really look at the whole issue of the quality seed bank program for a rapid agricultural disaster response in the Caribbean. So in a nutshell, these are some of the immediate efforts. But I just want to touch on one or two things I would not mention previously. One of the things that we have done, especially for the vulnerable groups in Dominica, for women in particular, is the establishment of a microfinance facility that they can use to, again, adapt to certain technologies to reduce their vulnerabilities. That is something that we want to make mention of, and we did that through support under a UNDP facility. So I just wanted to make mention of that because that is something that I think we have not mentioned yet, but this is something that we tend to promote in terms of supporting adoption of technologies. So I will stop here and wait for the questions section so that I could respond to any specific areas. Thanks, Brett.
All right, thanks, Mr. Kopel. And well received too, especially your last point on what are the access to finance opportunities that we have, especially for women and youth in their recovery process, noting the availability and the need to promote it. Well received, the need for us to not just plan or be prepared to respond to the event, but our agribusinesses have it incorporated. And I think this is really clear across the board, not when we're doing crop production, livestock, fisheries. We need to have disaster preparedness as part of our overall business planning taken into account. So thank you and well received. Colleagues, just for those who are joining us online and on the Zoom platform, the Food Security and Livelihood Survey, the Secretariat has shared the link, so please be sure to click on the link and participate in this through the links provided to respond to the survey. So thank you for that. All right, up next, we move back within our regional, one of our CARICOM institutions. We are going to now invite Mr. Ansari Hussain, the Executive Director from the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, to share with us the perspectives of CARDI on the immediate priority activities and areas, that CARDI supports in disaster recovery for the agricultural sector. Mr. Hussain, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairperson. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Share. Okay, you can hear me and can see the presentation?
Yes, please. You can proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. The topic of my presentation is to really explain CARDI's role in disaster response and recovery efforts, particularly with reference to the fact that the hurricane season is upon us. The outline, I will present a few facts and figures and some tips for before and after hurricane event. We'll go into CARDI's role in response and recovery, and I will share some thoughts for the future. So in terms of hurricanes in the Caribbean and some facts, as you know, the intensity and frequency of hurricanes are becoming more intense and you're getting a lot of them more frequently. The region is 7 times more likely to be hit by natural disasters than larger states and twice as likely as other smaller states, according to the IMF. The region is also heavily indebted, and the economic cost of these disasters are really widening our debt to the GDP ratio. And we focus here on the fact that it's expensive business when it comes to recovering after hurricanes and other natural disasters in our part of the world. The IDB showed that the average increase in debt measured as the difference between post and pre-storm trends was about 10%. 3 years after storm, you still had debt levels 18% higher than what would have been expected otherwise. And to finance these recovery efforts, usually governments revert to borrowing, which further increases our debt. The small island states in the Caribbean are heavily reliant on sectors that are particularly sensitive to weather. And we all know our islands and countries in the Caribbean are heavily reliant on tourism, most of us, and agriculture. This slide just shows you some of the damages, the cost, and the losses with reference to a few hurricanes over the last few years in a few countries. So we had Dominica in 2017, Hurricane Maria. You see $930.9 million in damage, $380.2 million in loss, 226% of the 2016 GDP. Large figures. Hurricane Dorian in Bahamas in 2019. We had $2.5 billion US in damage, US $717 million in losses. In terms of agriculture specifically, we had about 10 million US. When you speak about the recent one in Grenada, Hurricane Beryl last year, which also affected St. Vincent and a couple other countries, we had $218 million in damages, 16.5% of Grenada 2023 GDP. Now, these are just some tips before the start of the hurricane season in terms of getting prepared. I think I heard one of the presenters before touch on some as well. So I won't spend much time here. It speaks about getting prepared. The usual thing we'll do, clean out our waterways to ensure you have proper flow of water, taking an inventory of all your assets, making sure you have your photos and videos so that you can have evidence when the persons come around to do the assessments when it comes to compensation. Secure all your documents just as they would do in terms of your personal birth certificate and so on. Secure all your documents relating to livestock and crops to help with insurance purposes. Make sure your animals have good drinking water. You have the generators, you have feed for animals, and tag all your animals because some may, of course, get loose during the event. Now, when the hurricane is imminent, you ensure your farm workers, your family, your animals are safe. You secure equipment, feed and whatnot. Secure your windows. If the animals are housed during the hurricane season, make sure there's ventilation, feed and water provided. Don't ever keep them tied. If you normally tie them, you'll need to let them go so that they can roam and seek safe harbor somewhere. Harvest the crops that are ready because likely you're gonna lose them. So harvest crops so that you could at least get some revenue when the event has passed. In terms of greenhouses, you know, these plastics tear easily when you have high winds. So you try to remove plastics. I know it is a labor-intensive process, but you try to remove them. You usually have a few days notice when a hurricane in particular coming, so you have some time to try to remove your plastics. These days, you have people that have, when you're constructing greenhouses, you have the removable roofs and so on to make it easier to prepare for when this hurricane coming. After the hurricane, you wait for the all clear from the authorities, of course. Ensure family and so on safe. The usual things that we do when in terms of our personal movements, avoid any electrical lines and so on, unstable structures. Again, you take photos of damages. So I think even Sulima pointed out that you take photos before the event, after the event, so that persons can get an assessment of what you really lost. Report your losses through the official channels. Assess what could be salvaged, remove any debris, provide clean water, feed for livestock, and check for any injuries, disease that the livestock may have acquired. In terms of medium to long term, you need to continue pest and disease monitoring and management. Consider probably growing some fast-growing crops, short crops, that will help you get some revenue to tide you over while you rebuild your enterprise better. You could choose things like cover crops and so on to help cover the soil in cases where the vegetation would have been lost. When it comes to CARI's role, we are, of course, like most, I think all of the other institutions on this panel, part of the CDMA-led Caribbean Development Partners Group, and this is a group that convenes before an event, during an event, after an event, to ensure there's proper coordination of responses to disasters in the region. One of the activities of this group is to do the post-disaster needs assessment. There's a RNAT, Rapid Needs Assessment Team, that is deployed immediately after disaster, and once humans, we can move into the area, the team is deployed, and this RNAT, we call it, Rapid Needs Assessment Team, do assessments in various sectors. You have health and security and whatnot. CARI usually participate in the agriculture needs assessment team. We have FAO there, ICA there as well. And we go into the country and try to do some assessment in terms of loss and damage. We also, as part of the recovery efforts now, our main contribution in terms of recovery, we try to mobilize seeds and planting material so that production could be restarted very soon afterwards, after the event. We have seed storage facilities in several of our territories. We have in Antigua, Belize. We had provided some support to strengthen the seed storage facility in Jamaica. We have some seeds as well in Trinidad. We have in Barbados as well, we have some hot pepper seeds. So we have germplasm banks in terms of seeds, and also we have planted material and vegetative material in various countries as well. So we have sweet potato, dasheen, banana, plantain, cassava in various countries. So that helps us to spread the risk, because when these hurricanes passing through the region, you may get about three or four countries may be affected. But CARI has offices and facilities in 14 member states. So we try to spread the risk as much as we can. But even so, after an event, even there's a huge demand for planting material, and there's really much more need to be done in terms of mobilizing the material that farmers need to get started to get restarted after an event. And this is where I think maybe there need to be some collaboration with the private sector as well, because they too have a lot of resources that can be mobilized to get to where it is needed. And of course, we contribute to resource mobilization when it comes to like financing, to go and get some money for projects that will help persons recover after the event. In terms of, again, now on the building resilience side, so you talk about recovery now, our focus too is on building some resilience into the system. We do a lot of capacity building events, training to help farmers adapt and transform the operations, the practices that we promote in terms of resiliency, from diversification, soil and water management, protected systems, training on using early warning systems and ICTs to better manage your enterprise. We also conduct research to support, to get science-based information to support decision-making on risk and adaptation and so on. I spoke about the germplasm collections already. We on a drive to expand it so that we could produce, as I said, there's a huge demand for planting material, especially when these hurricanes pass through. And when these huge hurricanes pass through our country, usually is the whole country affected. You know, we are small island states. We conduct research to identify tolerant varieties, especially when it comes to, in terms of the hurricane, it could be like flood tolerant varieties of crops. In terms of the other flip side to this is drought. And we also look to develop drought-tolerant varieties. Collaborating with the agencies to access resources that, well, again, this really focuses on the fact that we recognized a long time ago that no one institution really could do all that is required on its own under normal circumstances. And this is even more so when a disaster hits. We really need to get everybody on board. And that's where one of the fundamental principles of this CPDG, the Caribbean Partners Forum, which was established by CDMA, really comes into play. Sharing information on best practices on disaster preparedness and recovery. We have a partnership with CIMH in this regard to produce information bulletins. And these are just a few pictures on some of the things I mentioned in terms of building capacity, providing farmers with some material. We have a controlled agriculture structure there. And I think FAO was it? We just spoke extensively on hurricane damage loss assessment using satellite imagery and so on. And those are on the bottom right-hand corner. It's just some brochures, information brochures and bulletins we produce in collaboration with various entities, particularly CIMH. In terms of the future, there's an insurance package that has been promoting the Regional Economical Agri-Insurance Program. And there's a pilot recently that was launched, and I think there's need to expand it so that all farmers across the region could really benefit from insurance. That's a big issue in the region. We need to get investment to help develop our resilience to these effects of climate change. I spoke at the beginning about the cost. The cost of recovery is very high, so we need that to maybe focus a lot on the developing resiliency. And when it happens, and we have to deal with it. But we could also try to focus on the mitigation part of it. Countries should also have policies to incentivize farmers to adopt resilient practices, scaling up the use of decision support tools. There are a lot of tools that will have decision making. I think we just need to make persons aware of them. And of course, resilient building is fully integrated into our operations as we move forward. I think that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hossain. And I think it was good for us to be reminded of what we needed to do in terms of preparing for the disaster and responding. So we welcome that. I also am pretty happy to also remind the region that within CARI, they do have seeds and have started to work in partnership with several agencies to support disaster recovery, but also in disaster preparedness. Because there are a number of points that we've made, in particular with seeds and germplasm banks that are in the region that we need to access and to continue to support CARI with, since our recovery response, what we do right after is also pretty critical. And where do we start getting our food back on track, our food supply, sorry, back on track. So thank you for that. All right, next up, and by no means last, we are now going to hear from the farmers themselves. And I would like to invite to the floor Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Errington Thompson from the Agricultural Alliance of the Caribbean, to share with us on the farmers' perspectives and what key actions and practical approaches, related to particularly possibly for communication for during a disaster and during recovery that CARI is promoting amongst farmers. Mr. Thompson, the floor is yours. Hi, Mr. Thompson, are you back with us? All right, colleagues, give me 1 second. Let me double check. He was online earlier. All right, so while Mr. Errington Thompson may have dropped off the call inadvertently, I want to take an opportunity to remind us that please check in the chat and use the link to complete the food security survey. that is being conducted by CARICOM and WFP as a monitoring that is periodically being done throughout the Caribbean. So with that said, and I do not see Mr. Thompson with us, I am going to now open the floor for some questions. It's just at about the 1 o'clock hour. We just indulge you a little bit and give the participants an opportunity to share their thoughts, comments, reactions to the presentations of today. We brought it all together in terms of disaster recovery and reminding us of what we need to do in preparation and also as part of our response. You can feel free to post your questions in the chat. Those who are on the Zoom, do raise your hands in order to speak. Okay, so while we wait, I want to pass a question to Mrs. Gulston. Given your presentation and the experiences out of Trinidad and Tobago, could you identify, and I'm just going back through your presentation, some of the best practices or maybe even any key best practices that we want to, from a coordination perspective, that will feed back to SEDIMA, that will be important for us in the agricultural sector to take note of?
Thanks for the question. In terms of feedback mechanisms, I think it's important to remember that it's a multi-stakeholder process. Even though the impacts are directed to you, it's also important, as we mentioned, to keep records of immediate impacts, but also keep a record of your stock in advance of any hazard impact. So in terms of ensuring that you have records of your equipment, records of what crops are available that you have planted, keep records of the machinery, your boats, so that we have a proper understanding of what is the existing stock, so that in the event that any hazard impact happens, the post-disaster impact analysis will capture any incidents effectively. And through the presentations, we would have seen from the different presenters the multi-stakeholder approach in terms of getting these assessments done. So, for example, ICA would lead the process because they are the experts in terms of agriculture, but in terms of the different stakeholders, it's also a multi-stakeholder process to ensure that the proper relief efforts, but also recovery efforts are specific for the impact, and persons are compensated adequately in the case of damage and loss. So I just wanted to reiterate the process of our engagement, ensure that you have proper records so that the assessment can happen as smoothly as possible. And this will support any grant applications in terms of resources that may be available. I know seed banks, the seed bank topic came up, and persons have access to seed banks in case of any incidents. And it's just about persons understanding what shock response or social protection mechanisms are in place within their respective countries to be able to absorb some of the impacts and having the necessary information that would help you build your resilience. So I think that's just the message that I would like to share in terms of feedback loop.
Thank you. So really important, colleagues, data, record keeping, something it comes back to. Keeping the information, documenting and having it available, especially during times of our response and also from recovery. In order to access resources, access funding, you need to have data and information at your farm level, at your fisheries level, that will feed back into the multi-stakeholder mechanism where they're going to come and call for data in order to help expedite our recovery response. Thank you. I want to pass a question on that came in off the floor from those listening online. And I probably want to ask Mr. Hossein. We have a question. How can young adults 20 to 30-year-olds with academic interests in the field of research contribute towards the areas of research that are needed to enhance the assessment of vulnerabilities and adaptive technologies, especially for farmers, women, and youth. It was a long question, so let me go back to
Yeah, repeat that.
how can young adults between the 20s and 30s, so say, or youth, like herself, with academic interests in the field of research, contribute to enhancing the research that is needed to enhance
Right, okay.
assessments of vulnerabilities and adaptive technologies
Yeah.
for farmers,
Well,
women, and youth.
I hope it seems as though the person is looking for an opportunity to contribute to research agenda of the region.
Yes.
Regardless of what it is.
Yes.
Now there are the various avenues. You have, I'm not sure in terms of her qualifications what she has so far, but you have the various universities in the region that you could enroll in and do your PhD or MSc or MPhil and whatnot. And as part of that, you will have a research project and you can do your research project in that field of study. In terms of CARI itself, there is the possibility that once you offer yourself, we could have something like an internship program, professional internship program, depending on your qualifications, and we could develop a project around that area of interest and seek some funding and mobilize some resources. So I think those are the two main. I mean, I know that I'm not sure where the person is from, but I have some countries have for example, Trinidad and Tobago has an OJT program. And that's another avenue in which you can enroll into the OJT program and express your interest in terms of where you want to go and what are your goals and objectives in terms of your studies and your career. And they will try to guide you and try to place you in a suitable environment so that you could do that.
Oh, great. So channeling them through our established institutions, but also noting that CARI does have a mechanism. If you reach out to their team, that they can engage in an internship program to support your application of research. And they're in 14 member states, so it can be tailored and be specific. If there's a country-specific area a country-specific application you like, or within their network, look at a regional type of approach. So thank you for that, Mr. Hussein. We have another question. It's technology-driven, so I think I want to invite my colleague, Dr. Singh, just in terms of and perspectives. Are there apps or other considerations for apps to be developed for farmers or other vulnerable persons to find access to information about resources and that can help them during the recovery stage? I believe I want to ask you to answer the question in two parts. One, first, you will answer the question related to apps that can be used to access information for farmers that you may be aware of. And I am going to ask my colleague from the CARICOM Secretariat, Ms. Denise, from a CARICOM Secretariat perspective, where can farmers access some more information in this regard? So, Dr. Singh, I can take your response first.
Thank you very much, Barman. In terms of existing apps, off the top of my head, I can't recall any, but I know we're currently working to develop some apps that will give farmers will serve as kind of early warning systems that will monitor environmental conditions and weather and so on, and provide notifications of impending issues, whether it's like disease conditions are conducive to disease, you should do this or you should do that. So those apps are in the works. We have a REACH project in the Caribbean that we are working towards that with the Italian research company. So something is in the pipeline that should be coming shortly.
Okay, thank you. So we have nothing, at least not aware of currently, but certainly in the pipeline, some will be done on apps. Ms. Murillo, from the CARICOM Secretariat perspective, is there a place that we can direct persons to access information or where they can access some information about resources? especially for contacts during the recovery stage? Where can we direct them to?
Hi, yes, thanks for the question. For information regarding disaster relief, recovery, and so forth, the best suited would be CDEMA. I think they would have the facility, and they have the outlet to direct the farmers or any group of farmers too. So from our end, I would direct them to the CDEMA. Yeah.
All right, good. Yeah, as a regional coordinating mechanism, you can direct the
Right, right.
questions through CDEMA, and they will connect it to the network, especially through the regional network that Mr. Hussein referred to, as also mentioned by Dr. Singh. Through that mechanism to tap into information, especially during the recovery stage. Thank you for that. This is a question I'm going to place to all four panelists. In terms of what are some of the decision-making tools that can be used to inform? And I'm going to ask Mr. Hussein probably to start the response, and then I'm going to ask everyone to probably give us, if you haven't heard it before, anything that you can add to it. Some of those decision support tools that can be used.
This is in terms of recovery, or I think
Yeah,
we
yes,
have
in
to
terms of
plan-
inform, in terms of preparedness and
Yeah, in
recovery,
terms
but
of
more so for preparedness.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if you prepare, I think somebody probably mentioned earlier, if you prepare well, it will make your recovery easier. And in terms of preparedness, I would want to start with there are various tools in terms of monitoring the weather systems. Some satellite images that are available online. CIMH usually also send out some bulletins. I think probably what we need to do, sometimes you find that these bulletins reach certain people, but don't go to where it is most needed. Same, I find that these bulletins may reach CARI, may reach institutions and so on, but we need to find a mechanism for it to reach down on the ground, straight to the farmers. Sometimes we assume that the farmers, everybody have phones and so on, but I mean, you may not have the Wi-Fi capability or to access the various apps to monitor the systems as they come in. I think that is one of the most, those type of tools, and you have various tools online. I use one, I can't remember the exact address, but it's Perial something, and I would monitor it from there. It's the National Met Office and the National Disaster Preparedness Office. So in Trinidad, we have the ODPM. They too would usually send out, in the past, they would send out text messages. They would also send out, they'll have updates on the various platforms. So you need to keep monitoring the platforms, the various online platforms, radio and so on, to ensure you have the data in terms of what is coming so that you can adequately prepare. And once you, as I said, if you prepare well, it will make your life easier after when it comes to recovery. So I think you asked for how do we prepare better? Monitor using these different avenues. Proper monitoring of the systems.
All right, thank you. So it sounds like we do have to possibly, and I even probably in my own reflection and probably consultation discussion with Secretariat, how we, and what you're suggesting is as the agricultural sector, we should sort of put together some of the areas and the places where persons can go to or the tools that they can use to better prepare and monitor.
I think there's a short, the way how we normally the regional reach farmers is usually through extension officers. But as you know, there is a shortage in terms of the number of extension officers and the ability for extension officers to reach all these farmers in their particular area quickly enough. So in times of disaster, perhaps there needs to be some sort of mechanism. There needs to be some mechanism in place to get to all these people very rapidly, so that they could have the information in hand to adequately prepare for what is coming.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Singh, can I ask from your perspective from FAO, any contributions to some of the decision-making tools that can be utilized that will get information to the farmers to add to what Mr. Hussein has provided?
Right. Thank you, Verma. The one I would want to mention here is the anticipatory action protocol, because it's a tool and a protocol that can be used to guide farmers in how they prepare once the situation presents itself. So once the farmers are trained and even at the various levels, community and national level, everyone are trained, they're aware of what actions should be taken when once the information from the various weather bulletins come in. I think using the protocol will guide them to prepare in such a way that they mitigate the impacts. Doing things such as like pre-positioning things that they may need after disaster and so on. So I would say from my perspective, that's the AA protocols.
Okay. All right, good. And you're linking it back to anticipatory action planning, and putting some, whatever, probably extended to early warning systems in place that would also get the information back down to the farmers, and probably strengthening our systems in that regard. Okay, thank you. I go to my colleague, Mr. Kopel, as I wrap up, and coming backwards. Anything that you can contribute towards what we have said so far in relation to supporting any tools to support the decisions that farmers need to do on the ground?
All right. It's more one of consideration. First, I know that most, if not all, farmers would really be in possession of a cell phone and they can receive information. But I also think that we also need to consider the reverse, where farmers can provide information digitally by transmitting it through the cell phone. So there's an exchange of information that we could receive, production information, receive information from some of these situations that they may encounter. I also believe that we actually need to start using the precision tools, the drones, in capturing information before and after. And based on that, we probably need to have some more information on the farm coordinates. And if we can have information on farm coordinates, it's easy to do some assessment of farms, even continuously. So when during the assessment process, you can use those drones to capture information quickly, because I will tell you, based on experiences, that it's very difficult to access farms after a storm. And the quickest way to see what's going on the farm is the use of the drones. So I think that is something that we need to include as part of the thinking as moving forward in terms of getting information across. Thank you.
All right, good. Well received. Better use of your phones and using the technology to access information and to share the information and to connect. So thank you very much. And Mrs. Gulston, any contributions, any additions from the regional perspective? I know from it's more coordination, but at the same time, adding to decision making, any tools or suggestions that we can add?
Okay, thanks for the question. In terms of decision-making tools, I think it is directly connected to what was mentioned by Ms. Murillo earlier in terms of the emergency response strategy and action plan implementation, and how well we work together to be able to implement this through the different tiers and levels of response, but also linked to the early warning for all initiative by the UN that directly guides how we should implement multi-hazard early warning systems at the regional level and also the national levels. So just to mention, it takes a 4-pillar approach in terms of understanding risk. And it is important to keep abreast of what risk assessments have been done at the national level. And not just from the perspective of susceptibility and exposure, but also where the vulnerability and capacity indicators on a spatial scale representing, and how does it represent the farmers themselves in terms of their capacities and vulnerability, and then prioritizing some of the actions to be able to implement and build the resilience at that level. The second pillar would speak to ensuring that we are monitoring, and the representative from ICA would have mentioned this as well, making sure that we have the necessary monitoring, that we are aware of where to go for monitoring information. So, for example, in the case of hydrometeorological events, the Met offices will be that focal point for having that, having the alerts and the messaging issued to the different stakeholders. The third pillar is ensuring that the information reaches the persons who need it the most. So, for example, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, because I'm also wearing another hat, we have a public alert notification system that is able to allow farmers to register their information directly, and we are able to now send them a WhatsApp message, or they also have phone call alerts, text message, and also emails to be able to have that information real time in the case of large scale events. So in terms of tropical cyclones, for example, hurricanes, we would send out that early warning message so that persons are able to receive it and take the necessary anticipatory action. And pillar 4 under the early warning system, early warning for all initiative, is ensuring that we have that coordination mechanism to be able to act quickly and respond effectively to persons when they need the resources. And one of the systems that the ODPM that we have established is ensuring that we have a comprehensive picture of incident reporting. So when persons are impacted, we receive the information directly from the regional corporations in our case, to be able to understand what is the full extent of damage and losses so that we can be able to respond effectively. And this comes up on a centralized platform that is able to create that operational picture for where we need to prioritize some of our resources in terms of immediate relief. So that's some of the tools that we have available that we just wanted to share with the wider stakeholders on the call.
Thank you, Mrs. Goldstein, and actually very well received. I think it just flowed now until the answering the last question. I am now pleased to pass the floor back to the CARICOM Secretariat, to Ms. Murillo. We have come to the end of our session for today, a really rich session, and we thank the audience for their questions, and I was pleased to facilitate. So now, Ms. Murillo, I'll pass the floor to you for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Roberta, and thank you all for being a part of the series, preparing for the 2025 Caribbean hurricane season. Our panelists, thank you very, very much for taking out time, for sharing the valuable information. And for all the participants, those online, here on the Zoom link, as well as those on our social media, we want to thank you all for joining and sending in your questions or comments. They're all noted, they're all being heard, they're all being listened to. We have our collaborators, our regional partners we've been working very closely with throughout this series. The CARICOM Secretariat, of course, ourselves here. We have the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA. We want to thank you. The Caribbean Agriculture Health and Food Safety Agency, CAFSA, the Caribbean Agriculture Research and Development Institute, CARDI, the Caribbean Regional Fishery Mechanism, CRFM, the Food and Agriculture Organization for the United Nations, FAO, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, IICA. They're all key regional partners, and their efforts are seen. We have the 5 webinars completed, but it's not just a matter of completing. They are valuable resources. You can find them on the CARICOM or YouTube channel, that is. You can go back and review them if you need to. Farmers, fishers, policymakers, they're there. We've had engagements with the the private sector, the people on the ground, the farmers themselves, they were part of each session. The fisher folks, they were also part of it. So these are very valuable resources we've gathered through the seminar, the series of webinar. So we want to thank you. I think our goal was met, and we just would like to again and encourage you to please incorporate into your disaster preparedness plan all these tips, all the information shared, know who to go to, know where to get your resources from, how to prepare. So I would just want to thank you all, and as we close, we look forward to seeing future webinars and future engagements with you. So please stay tuned, and we want to thank you. Thank you, moderator, for today's session, for taking up that role. We want to thank you too. And I believe we are at the end. So thank you, and have a good day, rest of the day, and a great weekend.